You know that feeling in the pit of your stomach, that heavy, cold stone that sits there when you know something is wrong, even before you see it? We call it a mother's intuition. Doctors can't explain it. Scientists can't measure it. But every woman listening to me right now knows exactly what I'm talking about. I had that feeling the moment I turned my Buick onto the street of my son's new neighborhood. Ricky had been talking about this place for 6 months. A gated community just outside of Atlanta. The kind of place where the driveways are paved with brick and the mailboxes look like they cost more than my first car. He told me it was a dream home. He sent me pictures of the columns, the swimming pool, and the 3-car garage. He sounded so proud on the phone. But over the last few weeks, the phone calls stopped. The texts got shorter. And that silence is what made me pack a bag, get in the car, and drive 4 hours south. I didn't tell them I was coming. Sometimes a surprise visit is the only way to see the truth. I pulled up to the gate and punched in the code Ricky had given me months ago. The iron gates swung open slowly, and I drove through. The houses here were massive. They looked like castles. But as I navigated the winding streets, looking for number 402, I realized something. It was quiet. Too quiet. There were no kids playing in the yards. No neighbors talking over fences. Just big, silent houses hiding whatever was happening inside. When I finally pulled into Ricky's driveway, the first thing I noticed wasn't the grandeur. It was the grass. The house was magnificent, yes. It had those tall, white columns that make you think of old plantation homes, and huge windows that reflected the afternoon sun. But the landscaping was slipping. There were weeds poking through the expensive pavers in the driveway. The grass near the front porch was shaggy, overgrown by at least 2 weeks. To a stranger, it might look like nothing, but I raised Ricky better than that. My son is a man who takes pride in his work. Even when he lived in a tiny apartment, his balcony was swept and his plants were watered. Ricky doesn't let weeds grow unless he's too tired or too broken to pull them. I parked my car, took a deep breath, and grabbed my purse. My heart was beating a little faster than usual. I walked up the massive stone steps and rang the doorbell. It played a long, fancy chime that echoed inside. I waited. I rang it again. Finally, the heavy oak door swung open. It wasn't Ricky. It was Megan, his wife. Now, I have always tried to be a good mother-in-law. I kept my mouth shut when they spent too much on the wedding. I bit my tongue when she insisted they didn't need my potato salad recipe for Thanksgiving. I wanted them to be happy, but looking at Megan in that doorway, I felt a chill. She was dressed perfectly, hair done, makeup flawless, wearing a white sundress that looked brand new. But her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Dawn," she said. She didn't move aside to let me in immediately. She just stood there, blocking the entrance. "What are you doing here? Is everything okay?" "I'm fine, Megan," I said, putting on my best smile. "I just haven't heard from Ricky in a while. I was in the neighborhood visiting a friend from church and thought I'd stop by to see this dream house in person." It was a lie. I wasn't visiting anyone else, but it was a polite lie. Megan hesitated, then stepped back. "Oh, well, we're a bit of a mess right now, but come in." She was lying, too. The house wasn't a mess. It was a museum. I stepped into the foyer and nearly slipped on the polished marble floors. A massive crystal chandelier hung above my head, sparkling in the artificial light. To my left was a dining room with a table long enough to seat 20 people, though I doubted they knew 20 people. To my right was a sitting room filled with velvet furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. "It's impressive," I said, trying to keep the shock out of my voice. It was beautiful, but it felt cold. It felt like a hotel lobby, not a home. Ricky insisted on the best. Megan said, flipping her hair over her shoulder. Come into the living room. My mom is here. I followed her down the hall. The air conditioning was cranked up so high I actually shivered. We walked into the main living area, a room with ceilings that stretched up 2 stories high. And there, sprawled out on a beige leather sectional sofa, was Joyce, Megan's mother. It was 11 a.m. on a Tuesday. Joyce was wearing a silk floral robe and fuzzy slippers. She had the TV remote in one hand and a glass of white wine in the other. Her feet were propped up on the coffee table, a coffee table that looked like it was made of solid glass and gold. Oh, look who it is, Joyce drawled, not bothering to sit up. She took a sip of her wine. The surprise guest. Hello, Joyce, I said, clutching my purse a little tighter. Making yourself at home, I see. Well, someone has to enjoy it. Joyce laughed. Megan, honey, refill this for me and get Dawn some water. I'm sure she's thirsty after the drive. Water. Not tea, not coffee. Water. I looked around the room. It was cluttered with things that screamed expensive. There were giant vases with fake exotic flowers, gold-framed mirrors on every wall, a massive flat-screen TV that took up half the wall. It was flashy. It was loud. It was tacky. Where is Ricky? I asked, turning to Megan as she walked to a wet bar in the corner of the room. Megan stiffened. I saw it, just a subtle tightening of her shoulders. Oh, he's around, she said vaguely, pouring wine for her mother. You know, Ricky, always tinkering with something. He's probably working on a project. Is he working today? I asked. It's a Tuesday. He took some time off. Megan said quickly, to get the house settled. Here's your water. She handed me a crystal glass. I didn't drink it. I'd like to say hello to him, I said firmly. Joyce let out a sharp laugh from the couch. Let the man work, Dawn. He's got to pay for all this somehow, right? This lifestyle isn't free. Something about the way she said it made my blood boil. This lifestyle. I walked over to the fireplace mantel. It was crowded with porcelain figurines and candles. I pretended to admire them, but really I was looking for signs of my son. There were no pictures of Ricky here. There was a picture of Megan. A picture of Megan and Joyce on a cruise. A picture of the dog. But no Ricky. It's a beautiful mantle, I said, running my finger along the edge. A little dusty, though. I picked up a heavy, blue ceramic vase to check the weight of it. It was cheap material disguised as something fancy. But as I lifted it, something slid out from underneath. It was a piece of paper. An envelope. It had red letters stamped on the front. My heart stopped. I knew that stamp. I remembered that stamp from 40 years ago when my husband passed, and I was left alone with a baby and no income. It's a stamp that burns itself into your memory. Final notice. It was a utility bill for the electricity. I quickly glanced at the women. Megan was looking at her phone. Joyce was watching the TV. I slid the envelope out, just enough to see the amount due. The number made me gasp. It was over $600. And it was 3 months overdue. I looked around the room again. The crystal chandelier. The silk robe. The wine. The air conditioning blasting at 60 degrees. They were sitting in a palace, drinking wine, while the lights were about to be cut off. I shoved the bill back under the vase, my hands trembling. This wasn't just a messy budget. This was a disaster waiting to happen. Megan, I said, keeping my voice steady, though I felt like screaming. Are you sure Ricky is okay? He hasn't called me in weeks. Megan sighed, loud and dramatic, like a teenager being asked to clean her room. Dawn, really? He's fine. He's just stressed. This house is a lot of work. He gets moody. You know how men are. I know how my son is, I said, and he doesn't ignore his mother. Well, he's busy Joyce chimed in, pointing her wine glass at me. He wanted the big house. Now, he has to maintain it. He's probably out back or in the garage. But I wouldn't bother him. He's been in a foul mood lately. The garage. Why would he be in the garage in the middle of the day if he wasn't working? I looked at the final notice hidden under the vase. I looked at the weeds in the driveway in my mind. And I looked at these two women, comfortable and careless. I think I will go say hello, I said. I'll find my own way. Dawn, wait. Megan started to step forward, a look of panic finally crossing her face. Sit down, Megan, I said. I didn't shout. I didn't have to. I used the voice I used when Ricky was 6 years old and trying to hide a broken lamp. I am going to see my son. I turned my back on them and walked toward the hallway that led to the back of the house. The deeper I went into the house, the quieter it got. The luxury faded. The hallway was dark. I reached the door that led to the garage. My hand hovered over the knob. My stomach turned over again. That mother's intuition was screaming now. It was telling me to brace myself. It was telling me that the dream home ended at this door. I took a breath, turned the handle, and pushed the door open. The air in the garage was different. That's the first thing that hit me. Inside the house, it smelled like vanilla candles and expensive cleaning products. It was climate-controlled, perfectly 70 degrees. But the moment I stepped through that heavy fire door and let it click shut behind me, the air turned stale. It was cold, damp. It smelled like concrete gasoline. And something else, something musty, like old laundry that had been sitting too long. My eyes took a second to adjust to the dim light. There were no windows in here. The only light came from a single bulb hanging from the ceiling and the thin slivers of daylight creeping in under the main garage doors. At first, all I saw were the cars. There was Megan's SUV, a big white luxury truck that looked like it had just rolled off the showroom floor. It was parked right in the center, taking up the most space. Next to it was Ricky's work truck, pushed off to the side, close to the wall. Ricky, I called out softly. My voice echoed a little off the concrete walls. There was no answer, just the low hum of a refrigerator in the corner and the sound of my own breathing. I walked further in, navigating around a stack of cardboard boxes that hadn't been unpacked. I told myself I was being silly. He was probably just in the bathroom, or maybe he had run to the hardware store. But my feet kept moving toward the back corner of the garage, behind the water heater. That's when I saw it. It wasn't a workbench. It wasn't a project. It was a living space. Or, at least, a sad excuse for one. Tucked away in the darkest corner of the garage, wedged between a tool chest and the wall, was a cot. Not a bed. A camping cot, the kind with the green canvas stretched over a metal frame. I stopped dead in my tracks. My hand flew to my mouth before I could stop it. On the cot lay my son. Ricky was curled up on his side, still wearing his work boots. He had an old, gray wool blanket pulled up to his chin, the scratchy kind we use to keep in the trunk of the car for emergencies. Next to the cot, on top of an overturned milk crate, was a small space heater. It wasn't turned on, but it was plugged in, the orange cord snaking across the floor. There were fast food wrappers crumpled on the floor, a half-eaten burger, a bottle of water. This wasn't a nap. This wasn't a man taking a break from fixing a shelf. This was where he lived. I stood there for a long moment, unable to move. I looked at the luxury SUV 5 feet away, shining under the light. Then I looked at my son, shivering slightly in his sleep on a canvas cot. He looked older. That's what broke my heart the most. Ricky is 35 years old. He has always been strong, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who fills up a room. But lying there, he looked small. His face was gaunt, his cheeks hollow. There were deep dark circles under his eyes that I could see even in the shadows. He looked like a man who hadn't had a peaceful night of sleep in years. I stepped closer, my heels clicking softly on the concrete. Ricky stirred. He groaned, a low, painful sound, and rolled over. His eyes fluttered open. For a second, he looked confused, staring at the ceiling of the garage. Then he saw me. He scrambled up so fast he nearly knocked the space heater over. "Mom." His voice was rough, like he hadn't spoken in days. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, trying to smooth down his wrinkled shirt. "Mom, what are you doing here?" He looked terrified, not happy to see me. Terrified. "I came to see you, Ricky." I said. My voice was trembling, but I forced it to be steady. "I knocked on the front door. Megan said you were working." He wouldn't look me in the eye. He looked at his boots. He looked at the tool chest. He looked anywhere but at me. "Yeah," he stammered. "Yeah, I was just taking a quick break. I must have dozed off. Long week, you know?" He tried to laugh, but it came out as a dry, hacking cough. He stood up, trying to block my view of the cot with his body. He was trying to hide it, as if I hadn't already seen the pillow with the yellow stain, as if I hadn't seen the alarm clock on the floor. "A break?" I asked. I took a step forward. I reached out and touched the wool blanket. It was cold. "Ricky, you have a pillow here. You have a toothbrush on that shelf. Don't lie to me." He slumped. The fight went out of him instantly. He sat back down on the edge of the cot, the metal frame creaking under his weight. He put his head in his hands. "It's temporary, Mom," he whispered into his palms. "Just for a little while." "Why?" I demanded. "You have a 5-bedroom house. Ricky, 5 bedrooms. I saw the listing. Why are you sleeping next to the lawnmower?" He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed and watery. "It keeps the peace, Mom. Joyce, Megan's mom, she has a bad back. She needed the guest suite on the main floor. And Megan, she needs her sleep." I snore. It was causing fights. I just figured, if I stay out here, everyone is happy. It's quiet. It's fine. Really? He was lying to himself. I could see it. He was trying to convince himself that this was normal, that a man who works 60 hours a week to pay for a mansion deserves to sleep in the garage like a stray dog. "Ricky," I said, dropping to my knees so I could look him in the face. "This is not fine. This is abuse." "Don't say that," he snapped, a flash of anger crossing his face. "You don't understand the pressure, Mom. I have to keep this family together. If sleeping out here keeps Megan calm, I'll do it." Before I could answer, the door from the house opened. The sound of laughter spilled into the garage, bright and jarring. Megan walked in. She was holding her glass of wine. She didn't look shocked to see us. She didn't look embarrassed that her mother-in-law had found her husband sleeping in filth. She looked annoyed. "Ricky," she sighed, leaning against the doorframe. "I thought you were going to fix that rattling noise in my car. I have to go to brunch tomorrow." She looked at me, then at Ricky on the cot, and she smirked. It wasn't a warm smile. It was a cold, satisfied curl of the lip. "I see you found his man cave," she said to me, gesturing vaguely at the corner. I stood up slowly. My knees popped. I brushed the dust off my skirt and turned to face her. "Man cave?" I repeated. "Megan, he is sleeping on a cot, beside the trash cans." Megan took a sip of her wine. She shrugged, utterly unbothered. "Well, Dawn, look around," she said, waving her hand at the expensive SUV and the walls of the house. "Do you have any idea what the mortgage is on this place? And the heating bill? Ricky knows the deal. If we want to live in this neighborhood, we have to make sacrifices." She walked over to the SUV and inspected the side mirror, checking her reflection. "Besides," she added, laughing lightly as if it were a funny joke. It's all he can afford right now. He barely makes the minimum payments, as it is. If he wants a spot in the master bedroom, maybe he should have worked harder for that promotion. I felt the blood drain from my face. She wasn't just selfish. She was cruel. She enjoyed this. She liked seeing him small. She liked seeing him lowered. It gave her power. And my mother? Megan continued, turning back to the door. She stays in the house. She's family. And honestly, Ricky smells like grease half the time anyway. It's better for everyone this way. She looked at Ricky. Fix the car, Ricky. Don't make me ask twice. Then she turned and walked back inside, the heavy door clicking shut behind her. The silence rushed back into the garage. I looked at my son. He hadn't said a word. He was staring at the floor, his shoulders hunched, defeated. He accepted it. He believed he deserved this. I looked at the closed door. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. Not anymore. I didn't scream. I didn't chase after her. Screaming is what you do when you are helpless. I wasn't helpless. I looked at the cot. I looked at the dark circles under my son's eyes. I reached out and squeezed Ricky's shoulder. I didn't offer him money. I didn't tell him to leave her. Not yet. He wasn't ready to hear it. He was too broken. Wash your face, son, I said quietly. I'm going to take you out to dinner. He looked up, surprised. Mom, I can't. Megan said. I don't care what Megan said. I interrupted. My voice was low, hard as the concrete floor beneath us. Get in the truck. As he stood up to change his shirt, I stared at that door one last time. Megan thought this was funny. She thought she had won. She thought Ricky was weak, and I was just a harmless old grandmother who would drink her water and go home. She had no idea. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a soldier. And looking at my boy living like a prisoner in his own home, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't leaving Atlanta until I burned her little kingdom to the ground. I stood there shivering in that cold garage, looking at my boy. Some people tell me I should have minded my own business. They say a good mother-in-law keeps her mouth shut and stays in her lane. If you think I should have walked away and let him sleep next to the trash while they drank wine, go ahead and tell me in the comments why you think that's okay. But if you would have burned the world down to protect your child, hit that subscribe button right now. Prove to me I'm not the only mother left who still fights. I didn't take Ricky to dinner right away. I wish I had. I wish I had grabbed him by the collar of his dirty work shirt, put him in my car, and drove until we hit the Florida state line. But life doesn't work that way. Ricky insisted he needed to shower first. He was terrified of upsetting Megan's schedule. So I found myself back in that freezing cold kitchen, sitting at a marble island that cost more than my first house. Since you're here, you might as well eat, Megan said. She didn't ask. She just announced it. She and Joyce were sitting at the dining table. They had ordered takeout, and not just pizza or Chinese food. They had ordered sushi, giant platters of it, bright orange rolls topped with spicy mayo, thick slices of tuna, and seaweed salads. It smelled fresh and expensive. I sat there, waiting. I assumed she would offer me a plate. Instead, Megan opened the refrigerator. She rummaged around for a moment, moving aside bottles of imported sparkling water and organic juices. Then she pulled out a package of ham, the cheap, processed kind that's slimy when you open it, and a loaf of white bread. She slapped 2 pieces of bread on a paper plate, threw a single slice of ham in the middle, and slid it across the island toward me. No mustard, no mayo, no napkin. Sorry, she said, not looking sorry at all. She was already walking back to the dining table with her chopsticks in hand. We didn't know you were coming. We only ordered enough sushi for 2. And honestly, with Ricky's salary the way it is, Budgets are tight. We can't just feed everyone who drops by. I looked at the sandwich. Then I looked at the platter of sushi that easily cost $80. Budgets are tight. That's what she said. Joyce laughed, popping a piece of shrimp tempura into her mouth. Don't worry, Dawn. Ham is good for you. Less sodium than soy sauce, right? I felt the heat rise up my neck. It wasn't about the food. I've eaten plenty of ham sandwiches in my life. I raised Ricky on tuna casserole and beans on toast when times were hard. It wasn't the food. It was the message. They were telling me my place. They were the queens of the castle, eating the feast. I was the peasant, lucky to get the crumbs. I didn't touch the sandwich. I took a sip of my water and watched them eat. I watched Megan pour another glass of wine. I watched Joyce complain that the rice was a little dry. They ignored me completely. They talked about a spa weekend they were planning for next month. They talked about a new purse Megan wanted. Ricky says we can't afford it. Megan complained, dipping a roll in sauce. But he's just being dramatic. He can pick up extra shifts. He's always tired. I told him, you sleep in the garage, you get plenty of rest. They both giggled. My hands were clenched so tight in my lap, my knuckles were white. But I didn't say a word. I just listened. I let them think I was defeated, because when people think you're defeated, they get sloppy. They stop watching what they say. And more importantly, they stop watching what they throw away. When they finished, Megan sighed and pushed her plate away. Ugh, I'm stuffed. Mom, let's go watch that show in the living room. I don't feel like cleaning this up right now. Leave it, I said. My voice surprised them. I'll clean up, I said, standing up. You girls go relax. It's the least I can do for the lunch. Megan looked at me with suspicion for a second, but laziness won out. Okay, just make sure you rinse the containers before you recycle them. The HOA is strict about trash. Of course, I said. They left the room. I waited until I heard the TV turn on in the living room. I waited until I heard the theme song of some reality show blaring through the speakers. Then I went to work. I didn't wash the dishes. I went straight to the corner of the kitchen where they kept the mail and the recycling bin. Megan had mentioned the HOA was strict about trash. That meant they probably didn't shred things. They probably just tossed everything in the blue bin, assuming no one would ever look. I pulled the bin out from under the sink. It was full of junk mail, catalogs for expensive furniture stores, and empty wine bottles. But near the bottom, buried under a stack of magazines, were envelopes, open envelopes. I started digging. My heart was pounding in my ears. I felt like a criminal in my son's own house. But I needed to know. I needed to know why my son was sleeping on a cot while these women were planning spa weekends. I found a credit card bill first. It was under Megan's name. The balance was over $10,000. The charges were all for clothing stores, salons, and this made me pause, a jewelry store. But that wasn't the smoking gun. That was just bad spending. I needed more. I dug deeper. My fingers brushed against a thick, brown envelope. It was a bank statement, a joint checking account for Ricky and Megan Brown. I pulled it out and smoothed it flat on the counter. I scanned the lines. Deposit Ricky's paycheck. It was a good paycheck. My son makes good money. He's a supervisor at a logistics company. He works hard. Then I looked at the withdrawals. Mortgage, utilities, car payment. And then I saw it. Transfer, $500. Transfer, $1,200. Transfer, $800. All of them were going to the same place. External ACCT, ending in 4490. There were 5 transfers in the last month alone. Thousands of dollars. Money that should have gone to the electric bill. Money that should have fixed the driveway. But where was it going? I frantically dug through the bin again. I needed to find something with that account number. I pushed aside coffee grounds and sticky sushi containers. Then I found it. A small white envelope. It was a bank letter addressed to Joyce Miller. It had been opened and crumpled up. I smoothed it out. It was a welcome letter for a new savings account ending in 4490. The room started to spin. Ricky wasn't broke because of the house. He wasn't broke because of inflation. He was broke because his wife was siphoning his paycheck directly into her mother's private account. This wasn't budgeting. This was theft. They were bleeding him dry. They were taking the money he earned with his sweat and his long hours, and they were funneling it to Joyce so she could buy wine and silk robes while telling Ricky they couldn't afford the electric bill. And the worst part, they were making him sleep in the garage as punishment for being poor. I looked down at the papers in my hand. I wanted to march into the living room and throw them in Megan's face. I wanted to scream until the windows shattered. But I stopped myself. If I did that, what would happen? Megan would cry. She would lie. She would say it was for emergencies. She would turn Ricky against me. She would threaten to leave him, and Ricky, battered and broken as he was, would beg her to stay. He would believe her lies because he was too tired to fight. I couldn't just yell. I needed leverage. I needed to be smarter than them. I folded the bank statements and the letter. I slipped them into my bra, right against my skin. I could feel the sharp edges of the paper scratching me, but it felt good. It felt like ammunition. I quickly rinsed the sushi platters and threw them in the trash to cover my tracks. I wiped down the counter. I took a deep breath. I had the evidence. Now, I needed a plan. I wasn't just going to get my son out of the garage. I was going to take everything from them. I walked out of the kitchen, past the living room where they were laughing at the TV, and headed for the front door. Leaving so soon? Megan called out without turning her head. Yes, I said, my voice eerily calm. I have a headache. I'm going to go lie down at my hotel. Okay, she said dismissively. Tell Ricky goodbye for us. Oh, don't worry, I whispered to myself as I closed the heavy front door behind me. I'll be talking to Ricky soon enough. I didn't drive straight to the hotel. I couldn't. My hands were shaking. So hard, I had to pull over into the parking lot of a gas station about 2 miles down the road. I sat there in my Buick, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I stared at the red brick wall of the convenience store, watching people go in and out buying sodas and lottery tickets. Normal people. People who weren't watching their children be destroyed. I wanted to cry. Part of me wanted to put my head on the steering wheel and just sob until my chest hurt. That's what a mother is supposed to do when her heart is broken, isn't it? But the tears didn't come. Instead, I felt heat. A burning, steady heat right in the center of my chest. It was anger. No, it was more than anger. It was rage. I reached into my shirt and pulled out the folded papers I had stolen from the trash. The bank statements. The evidence. I smoothed them out on the passenger seat. Transfer to Joyce Miller. $1,200. Transfer to Joyce Miller. $800. Every line was a betrayal. Every dollar was a nail in my son's coffin. I looked at the final notice, electric bill again. Ricky was sleeping in a garage because he thought they were broke. He was freezing at night because he thought he had failed as a provider. He was taking the blame, taking the shame, carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. And those 2 women were drinking wine and laughing at him. I put the car in gear. I didn't go back to the house to scream at them. Screaming is free. Screaming makes you feel better for 5 minutes, but it changes nothing. I didn't want to feel better. I wanted to change everything. I drove to my hotel. It was a simple place, clean and quiet. not a mansion, just a room with a bed and a coffee maker. I locked the door, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the edge of the bed. I needed help, not emotional support. I didn't need a hug. I needed a shark. I picked up my cell phone and scrolled through the contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Tommy, the Hammer Vance. Tommy wasn't a hitman, despite the nickname. He was an old friend from back home. We went to high school together 40 years ago. Tommy had made his fortune in real estate, buying distressed properties, flipping commercial buildings, and dealing with banks that didn't want to listen to reason. He was rough around the edges, he smoked cheap cigars, and he had a heart of gold if you were on his good side. If you were on his bad side, he would foreclose on your grandmother without blinking. I pressed call. It rang 3 times. Dawn Brown, a gravelly voice boomed on the other end. I haven't heard from you since the Christmas card. Please tell me you're calling to say you finally made that peach cobbler. Hello, Tommy, I said. My voice was steady. I wish I was calling about cobbler. I need a favor. A big one. The humor dropped out of his voice instantly. He knows me. He knows I don't ask for things unless the house is burning down. What's wrong? He asked. Is it Ricky? Ricky is in trouble, I said carefully, but not the kind you think. It's financial, and it's marital. I told him everything. I told him about the mansion, the garage, the cot next to the lawnmower, the sushi lunch, and finally I told him about the bank statements and the money being funneled to the mother-in-law. Tommy was silent for a long time. The only sound was the rustling of papers on his end. That's not a marriage, Dawn, he said, finally, his voice low and dangerous. That's a con artist working a mark. I know, I said, and my son is the mark. So what do you want to do? Tommy asked, you want me to recommend a divorce lawyer? I know a guy in Atlanta who can freeze assets faster than. No, I cut him off. A lawyer takes too long. And Ricky won't do it. He's scared, Tommy. He thinks he deserves this. If I bring in a lawyer now, Megan will just manipulate him. She'll cry. She'll blame the economy. She'll threaten to take the house. I need to take the house out of the equation. What do you mean? The house is in pre-foreclosure, I said, looking at the notes I had scribbled down from the mail I found. They are months behind. The bank is getting ready to move. Okay, Tommy said slowly, listening. I have money, Tommy, I said, and I did. My husband had good life insurance. I worked for 30 years at the county clerk's office and saved every penny. I drove the same car for a decade. I didn't take vacations. I have a nest egg. It was supposed to be for my retirement or for Ricky's inheritance one day. I don't want to just give him the money, I continued. If I pay off his arrears, Megan will just spend it again. It's like pouring water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom. You're right, Tommy agreed. Never bail out a sinking ship until you plug the leak. Exactly. So I don't want to pay the debt, I said, taking a deep breath. I want to own the debt. There was a pause. Then, I heard a low chuckle on the other end of the line. Dawn, Tommy said, sounding impressed. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I want to buy the note, Tommy, or whatever you call it. I want you to use your company to contact their bank. Tell them you're an investor looking to acquire distressed assets in that neighborhood. Buy the mortgage. I will wire you the funds. All of it. Cash. You want to be the bank, Tommy said. No, I corrected him. I want you to be the bank. They can't know it's me. If Ricky knows it's me, he'll be ashamed. If Megan knows it's me, she'll try to sweet-talk her way out of it. I want them to think a cold, hard, faceless investment firm from New York has taken over their mortgage. And I want this firm to be aggressive. Tommy whistled. You're talking about a hostile takeover of your own son's living room. I'm talking about saving his life. I snapped. Can you do it? I can do it, Tommy said. The bank will be happy to get the bad debt off their books. But Dawn, this is your life savings. This is a lot of money. If the house value drops, I don't care about the value of the house. I said, I care about the value of my son. Can you get the paperwork started tomorrow? I'll make the calls tonight, Tommy promised. By Friday, Vance Capital will hold the deed. We will send the demand letter on Monday. Good, I said. Make it scary, Tommy. Make it official. I want her to sweat. Consider it done, he said. And Dawn. Yes. Remind me never to make you angry. I hung up the phone. I sat there in the silence of the hotel room. The air conditioner hummed. I stood up and walked to the mirror above the dresser. I looked at myself. I saw the wrinkles around my eyes. I saw the gray hair. I saw a woman who looked like a sweet, harmless grandmother. A woman who bakes cookies and knits blankets. Megan looked at me and saw a checkbook she could drain or a nuisance she could ignore. She saw someone weak. I reached up and wiped a single tear that had managed to escape. It was cold on my cheek. I wasn't weak. I was a mother. And people forget that before a mother is a nurturer, she is a protector. You threaten her child, and you don't get cookies. You get claws. They want to play games with my son's life. I whispered to my reflection, my eyes hardening into steel. Fine. Let's play. I went to my purse, pulled out my checkbook, and laid it on the nightstand. I was about to spend nearly everything I had. I was about to risk my entire future. But as I thought about Ricky shivering on that cot, I knew it wasn't a risk. It was an investment. The trap was set. Now, I just had to wait for the mouse to take the cheese. 2 weeks later, I was back in that living room. I had told them I was extending my trip to visit some old friends in the city. Megan didn't care, as long as I wasn't sleeping in her guest room. I was staying at the hotel, but I made a point to drop by the house in the afternoons. I wanted a front row seat. The atmosphere in the house had changed. Before, it felt like a palace where queens held court. Now, it felt like a bunker before an air raid. It started at 2 p.m. on a Thursday. A courier truck pulled up the long driveway. I watched through the front window as a man in a brown uniform walked to the door, carrying a thick red and white envelope. Legal mail. I sat in the armchair in the corner, knitting a scarf I didn't need. I heard the doorbell ring. I heard Megan answer it. I heard the scratch of the pen as she signed for the package. When she walked back into the living room, she wasn't holding a glass of wine. She was ripping open the envelope with a serrated knife from the kitchen. Ricky had just walked in the door from work. He looked tired. As usual, grease under his fingernails, his shoulders slumped. What is it? Ricky asked, putting his keys on the counter. Megan didn't answer. She pulled out a stack of papers. She read the cover letter. Her face went pale. Not just white, gray. This can't be right, she stammered. What? Ricky asked, stepping closer. The bank sold the mortgage, Megan whispered, her voice trembling. They sold it to some investment group called Vance Capital. She flipped the page. Her eyes widened. They're calling the note, Ricky. They're demanding immediate payment of all arrears. $22,000. 22. Ricky choked. But I talked to the bank last week. They said we had time. They said we could work out a payment plan. Well, Vance Capital doesn't do payment plans. Megan screamed. She threw the papers onto the glass coffee table. They slid across the surface and stopped right in front of Joyce, who was painting her toenails on the sofa. Read the bottom line. Megan yelled. Failure to pay within 10 business days will result in the commencement of foreclosure and eviction proceedings. 10 days, Ricky. We have 10 days to come up with 20 grand, or we're on the street. Ricky picked up the papers. His hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. He looked like a man who had just been punched in the gut. I don't have it, he whispered. Megan, you know I don't have it. My paycheck doesn't clear until Friday, and that's only enough for the groceries and the car note. Megan turned on him like a viper. You don't have it? She screeched. Then get it. You're the man. You're supposed to provide. Go to your boss. Ask for an advance. Sell your truck. I don't care what you do, but you are not losing my house. I sat there, knitting. Click, click, click went the needles. Maybe, I said softly without looking up, you could sell some of things inside the house. The room went silent. Megan whipped her head around to look at me. She looked like she had forgotten I was there. Excuse me, she snapped. I stopped knitting and gestured around the room with one of the needles. Well, you need $20,000, I said calmly. This coffee table is gold leaf, isn't it? And those vases and that painting, surely those are worth something. If you're in a crisis, you sell the luxuries first. That's just common sense. Megan looked at me with pure disgust. We are not pawning our furniture like poor people, she spat. This is custom made, Dawn. You don't just sell it on Facebook Marketplace. Then what about Joyce? I asked. I turned my gaze to the woman on the sofa. Joyce had stopped painting her toenails. She was looking at the papers with a frown. Joyce, I said, my voice sweet as pie. You live here rent-free. You have a savings account, don't you? Maybe you could chip in? Help the children out of a tight spot. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. Ricky looked up, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. He looked at his mother-in-law. Joyce, could you? Just until I get my bonus at the end of the year, I'd pay you back. Joyce laughed. It was a nervous, high-pitched sound. Oh, honey, I don't have that kind of money, she said quickly, capping her nail polish. I'm on a fixed income. My Social Security barely covers my essentials. Essentials. I thought about the $1,200 Megan transferred to her last week. I thought about the silk robe. Really? I pressed. Because I thought I saw you bought a new designer handbag yesterday. The one with the big logo. Joyce's eyes narrowed into slits. She looked at Megan. Megan stepped between me and her mother. She was shaking with rage. Stop it, Megan hissed at me. Stop trying to pin this on my mother. This is Ricky's fault. He's the one who can't manage his money. She turned back to Ricky, grabbing him by the front of his work shirt. Fix this, Ricky. Call your mother. She pointed a finger right at my face. Ask her. Megan screamed. She has money. She has that insurance money from your dad. Make her write a check. Ricky looked at me. His face was red with shame. He looked down at his boots. I can't, he whispered. I can't ask her for that. She needs that for her retirement. Oh, grow up. Megan shouted. She looked at me, her eyes wild. Dawn, look at us. We are about to be evicted. Are you really going to sit there and knit while your son loses everything? Write the check. You can afford it. I put my knitting down slowly. I placed it in my tote bag. I stood up. I looked Megan right in the eye. No, I said. Megan's jaw dropped. What? No, I repeated. I will not write a check. Because throwing money at a problem doesn't fix it if you don't know where the money is going. You selfish old hag, Megan snarled. She took a step toward me. You'd rather see your son on the street than help us? You have no idea how the real world works, do you? You think you can just pinch pennies and save coupons, and everything works out? This is the real world, Dawn. You need capital. You need to support your family. I do support my family. I said quietly, you're useless. Megan screamed, get out. If you aren't going to pay, then get out of my house. Go back to your little shack in the country and leave us alone. Ricky stepped forward. Megan, stop. Don't talk to her like that. Shut up, Ricky, she yelled. She's useless. She's just watching us drown. I picked up my purse. I smoothed down my skirt. I walked to the door. I didn't look angry. I didn't look sad. I looked at Megan with a small, sad smile. You're right, dear, I said. I am just watching. I opened the front door. But sometimes, I added, looking back at her one last time, watching is the most important part. I closed the door before she could scream again. I walked down the stone steps to my car. I could hear shouting coming from inside the house. I could hear Megan throwing things. I got into my Buick and locked the doors. I took a deep breath and let it out. Megan thought I didn't know how the world worked. She thought I was powerless. She had no idea that the Vance Capital letter lying on her coffee table was written by my best friend. She had no idea that the eviction notice was authorized by my signature. She thought she was screaming at a helpless old woman. She didn't know she was screaming at her new landlord. I started the car. My hands weren't shaking this time. I felt calm. The trap was sprung. The cage door had slammed shut. Now, I just had to wait for them, to realize there was no way out. I waited 3 days. 3 days of letting them sweat. 3 days of letting Megan scream about lawyers and bankruptcy. 3 days of Ricky looking like a ghost. On the 4th morning, I called Ricky. I didn't ask him if he was busy. I didn't ask for permission. Meet me at Shelley's Diner on Main Street. I said, 10 minutes. Don't tell Megan. He showed up looking worse than before. His eyes were red, his hands were shaking, and he hadn't shaved. He slid into the booth opposite me, looking around nervously as if Megan might pop out from behind the pie counter. Mom, I can't stay long, he said, staring at the menu without reading it. She's spiraling. She's tearing the house apart, looking for documents. She says we're going to lose everything. I signaled the waitress. 2 coffees, please. Black. I waited until the waitress left. I folded my hands on the sticky table. You aren't going to lose everything, Ricky, I said quietly. You don't understand, he whispered, leaning in. This investment firm, Vance Capital, they're sharks. They sent another letter yesterday. They want us out in 30 days if we don't pay. Megan is talking about moving into an apartment downtown, but she says there's no room for me. She says I'll have to stay with a friend until I get my finances sorted. I felt that heat in my chest again. Even when the ship was sinking, Megan was already pushing him off the life raft. Ricky, I said, look at me. He looked up. He looked so much like his father in that moment, just lost. I reached into my purse. I didn't pull out a tissue. I pulled out a thick manila envelope. I slid it across the table, right over his silverware. Open it, I said. He hesitated. What is this? Did you get a loan? Mom, I told you I can't take your retirement money. Just open it. He undid the clasp. He pulled out the papers. He saw the deed. He saw the transfer of ownership. He saw the signature at the bottom of the purchase agreement. Vance Capital Holdings. I don't get it, he said, frowning. This is the company that's evicting us. Turn the page, I said. Look at the incorporation papers for Vance Capital. He flipped the page. He scanned the lines of legal jargon. Then his fingers stopped. Principal investor, Dawn Marie Brown. He froze. The diner noise, the clatter of plates, the sizzling of bacon seemed to disappear. He looked up at me, his mouth open. He choked out. You are Vance Capital? Tommy helped me set it up, I said calmly, taking a sip of my coffee. But, yes, it's my money. I bought the note, Ricky. The bank doesn't own your house anymore. I do. He stared at me as if I had just grown a second head. But why? Why did you send the eviction notice? Why did you scare us like that? Because you needed to wake up. I said sharply. If I had just paid the bill, Megan would have thanked me, bought a new purse, and put you back in the garage. I didn't do this to save your house, Ricky. I did this to save you. I reached across the table and grabbed his hand. His palm was rough, callous from work. You are a good man, I told him. You work hard. You love hard. But you have forgotten who you are. You are sleeping next to a lawnmower in a house you pay for, while a woman who steals from you sleeps in your bed. He pulled his hand back. She doesn't steal from me, Mom. She transfers $1,200 a month to Joyce, I said. I pulled out the bank statements I had found in the trash and slapped them on top of the deed. I found these. They are draining you, son. They are bleeding you dry and laughing while they do it. He looked at the bank statements. He saw the numbers. He saw the dates. The color drained from his face. I asked her about that money. He whispered, his voice trembling. She told me it was for a tax bill. She lied. She has been lying for a long time, I said, but it stops today. I leaned in closer. I own the house, Ricky. That means I decide who stays and who goes. And right now, the only person I see fit to live there is my son. Not the maid. Not the bank machine. My son. He looked down at the papers. He ran his hand over the signature. I watched the gears turning in his head. I watched the shame turn into something else. Something harder. Something stronger. So, he said slowly, if you own the house, they can't kick me out. No one can kick you out. I said, unless I say so. And I'm saying you need to go home. He took a deep breath. He sat up straighter. He looked at the coffee cup. Then he looked at me. I'm done sleeping in the garage. He stated, it wasn't a question. I think that's a good start. I smiled. We finished our coffee in silence. But it wasn't an awkward silence. It was the silence of soldiers preparing for battle. We drove back to the house in separate cars. I followed his truck. I watched him pull into the driveway. He didn't park on the side this time. He parked right in the middle, blocking Megan's SUV. I parked on the street and walked up the lawn. I wanted to see this. Ricky unlocked the front door. I followed him in. Megan and Joyce were in the living room, surrounded by boxes. They were frantically packing things, not to leave, but probably to hide them before the investors came. Ricky! Megan snapped when she saw him. Where have you been? I told you to call the bank again. We have to get an extension. Ricky didn't answer. He didn't even look at her. He walked straight past her. He walked with heavy, purposeful steps. He walked right past Joyce, who was wrapping a vase in bubble wrap. Ricky! Megan called out, confused. Where are you going? He marched down the hallway. He went straight to the master bedroom. I stood in the foyer, watching. Megan and Joyce followed him, looking bewildered. Ricky walked into the bedroom. He went to the walk-in closet. He grabbed an armful of clothes, floral blouses, silk robes, polyester pants. Joyce's clothes. Hey! Joyce screamed from the doorway. What are you doing with my things? Ricky turned around. He didn't yell. He didn't scream. He just walked past them, carrying the bundle of clothes like it was trash. He walked to the front door, opened it, and tossed the clothes onto the front porch. Ricky! Megan shrieked. Have you lost your mind? That is my mother's stuff. He turned back, walked into the bedroom again, and grabbed the pillows off the bed, the extra ones Joyce used. He threw those out too. Then, he stood in the doorway of the master bedroom. He filled the frame. He looked big again. What is wrong with you? Megan yelled, getting in his face. You are having a breakdown. Stop it right now, or I will call the police. Ricky looked down at her. He looked her right in the eye. Call them, he said. His voice was calm. Scary calm. I am sleeping in my bed tonight, Ricky said. He pointed a finger at the door. If your mother needs a place to sleep, The garage is empty. The cot is already set up. You can't do that. Joyce wailed. My back. There's a heater out there, Ricky said cold, reciting the words Megan had used on him. It's all you can afford right now. Megan stared at him. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She had never seen this Ricky before. She didn't know how to bully a man who wasn't afraid of her. I'm going to take a shower, Ricky announced. In my bathroom. If anyone disturbs me, I'm changing the locks. He closed the bedroom door. The click of the lock echoed through the silent house. I stood by the front door, clutching my purse. Megan turned to me, her face red and blotchy. Did you see that? Did you see what he did? You need to talk to him. I looked at the pile of Joyce's clothes on the porch. I looked at the closed bedroom door. I don't think he wants to talk right now, dear, I said, a little smile playing on my lips. He's had a long week. I turned and walked out to my car. The war wasn't over, but the first battle, we had won. He threw those silk clothes right onto the wet grass. It wasn't just laundry he was tossing out. It was his shame. Now, I know there are some of you watching who think I interfered too much. You think I should have let him be a man and struggle alone while they robbed him blind. If you think I was wrong to give him a sword, tell me why you'd let your son drown. But if you know that a mother's job doesn't end when he turns 18, support this channel. Don't just scroll past a victory. Subscribe. The next morning, the house felt like a bomb had gone off inside it. Ricky had slept in the master bedroom with the door locked. Megan had slept on the sofa in the living room, and Joyce had slept in the guest room, the one Ricky was supposed to be in if he hadn't reclaimed his own bed. I arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. I let myself in with the spare key Ricky had given me secretly the day before. When I walked in, the tension was so thick you could choke on it. Megan was pacing back and forth in the kitchen, her hair messy, wearing yesterday's clothes. She looked frantic. Joyce was sitting at the island, looking pale and nervous, clutching a coffee mug. When Megan saw me, she didn't say hello. She lunged. You, she screamed, pointing a manicured finger in my face. You need to talk to your son, right now. He has lost his mind. I closed the door behind me and locked it. I did it slowly, deliberately. Good morning to you too, Megan, I said calmly. Don't give me that, she snapped. Do you know what he did? He locked me out of my own bedroom. He threw my mother's clothes on the lawn. It rained last night, Dawn. Her silk blouses are ruined. Well, I said, walking past her to the living room. Maybe if she had picked them up instead of staring at them, they would be dry. Megan let out a sound of pure frustration. She followed me, her voice rising an octave. I am done, she yelled. I am calling the police. I am going to get a restraining order. He is unstable, Dawn. He's dangerous. I want him out of this house today. Right now. She pulled her phone out of her pocket and started tapping on the screen. I'm calling 911. I'm telling them I feel threatened. I stopped. I turned around. Put the phone down, Megan, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was heavy. It was the voice I used when Ricky was a teenager and thought he could sneak out past curfew. It was a voice that demanded to be heard. Megan froze. She looked at me, surprised by the tone. Excuse me, she said. You don't tell me what to do in my house. That's just it, I said, opening my purse. It's not your house. I pulled out the deed, the original, notarized deed that Tommy had couriered to me overnight. It was thick, heavy paper. I walked over to the coffee table, the gold leaf one she refused to sell, and slapped the document down on the glass. Thwack. What is this? Megan asked, looking down at it. Read it, I said. Megan picked it up. Her eyes scanned the page. She frowned. Vance Capital. I know this. This is the company that bought the mortgage. So what? They're evicting us anyway. Look at the signature line on the second page. I instructed. She flipped the page. Joyce leaned in, squinting to see. Megan's eyes stopped moving. Her mouth opened slightly. She blinked, as if she was trying to clear a smudge from her vision. Don Brown, she whispered. She looked up at me. Her face was a mask of total confusion. I don't understand. Why is your name on the deed? Because I bought it, I said. I stood tall, smoothing down my blazer. I am Vance Capital, Megan. I bought the note from the bank 3 weeks ago. I paid off the arrears. I own the mortgage. I own the title. I took a step closer to her. I own the roof over your head. I own the floor under your feet. And I own the garage where you made my son sleep. Megan dropped the papers. They fluttered to the floor. She looked like she was going to be sick. She stammered. You sent the eviction notice? You threatened to kick us out. I threatened to kick the tenants out. I corrected her. And as the owner of this property, I have the right to decide who lives here. But we're family. Joyce cried out from the kitchen stool. You can't treat family like a business. I whipped my head toward Joyce. The anger I had been holding back for a month finally flared in my eyes. Family? I asked, my voice dripping with ice. Family doesn't steal, Joyce. I reached into my purse again. This time, I pulled out the bank statements. The ones with the coffee stains on them from the trash. I know about the transfers. I said, $1,200 last month, $800 the month before, $500 before that. I held the papers up for them to see. You didn't just spend Ricky's money on shoes and wine, I said, looking directly at Megan. You siphoned it. You moved his hard-earned money into a secret account for your mother while he was working overtime to keep the lights on. You let him think he was failing when you were the one robbing him. Megan's face went white. She knew she was caught. That was for emergencies. She lied, her voice shaking. Is a designer handbag an emergency? I asked. Is a case of Chardonnay an emergency? I threw the statements on top of the deed. That is fraud, Megan. That is theft. And since I am the property owner, and I have proof that illegal activities are being conducted on the premises, I have grounds for immediate eviction. Megan started to cry. It wasn't a sad cry. It was a scared cry. The tears of a bully who finally met someone bigger. You can't do this, she sobbed. Ricky won't let you. He loves me. Does he? I asked. Or is he just afraid of losing his kids? Oh, wait, you don't have kids. You have a dog. And I'm pretty sure the dog likes Ricky better anyway. At that moment, the bedroom door opened. Ricky walked out. He was showered, shaved, and dressed in clean clothes. He looked like himself again. He looked at me, then at Megan crying on the floor. Ricky! Megan screamed, running to him. She tried to grab his arm. Your mother is crazy. She says she owns the house. She says she's kicking me out. Tell her to stop. Ricky looked at her hand on his arm. He gently but firmly removed it. She's not crazy, Megan, Ricky said. His voice was deep and steady. She showed me the papers yesterday. Megan stepped back, horrified. You knew? You knew. And you didn't tell me? You didn't tell me you were sending my paycheck to your mother, Ricky said. I guess we both have secrets. He walked over to me and stood by my side. He didn't say a word, but the image was clear. We were a united front, mother and son, iron and steel. I looked at Megan. Here is how this is going to work, I said. I am not calling the police for the fraud. Not yet. That depends on you. What do you want? Megan sniffled. I want you out, I said. Ricky stays. This is his home. He pays the mortgage to me now. And the money you stole, we're going to consider that a severance package. You keep it, but you leave everything else. The furniture, the electronics, the dog. You take your clothes, and you take your mother. When? Megan whispered. 24 hours, I said. If you are still here tomorrow at 9 a.m., I call the sheriff. And I will hand over those bank statements to the fraud division. Joyce slid off the stool. She looked terrified. But Dawn, Joyce wailed, clutching her robe. We have nowhere to go. We can't find an apartment in 24 hours. I have a bad back. I can't sleep in a hotel. I looked at Joyce. I looked at the woman who sat on a silk sofa while my son shivered on a canvas cot. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. Well, Joyce, I said, if you really can't find a place. I pointed toward the back door. The garage is available. Joyce gasped. Megan stared at me with pure hatred. There's a cot already set up, I added, enjoying every syllable. And a space heater. It's a little drafty, but hey, it's all you can afford right now. I picked up my purse. I'll see you tomorrow at 9 o'clock, I said to the room. I turned to Ricky and winked. Good to see you up, son. Thanks, Mom, he said, and for the first time in years, he smiled. A real smile. I walked out the front door, leaving the two of them standing in the ruins of their own greed. The sun was shining. The birds were singing. And for the first time since I arrived in Atlanta, the air didn't smell like lies. It smelled like justice. The garage is available. That's what I told her. Cruel? Maybe. Necessary? Absolutely. There are people watching this right now who think I'm the villain. They think I should have turned the other cheek and let them stay. If you're one of those people, I want you to go to the comments and tell me why you think thieves deserve a guest room. But if you believe in justice, real cold, hard justice, then you belong here. Subscribe today. Let's clean house together. It has been 6 months since I sat in that diner and watched my son's hand shake over a cup of black coffee. 6 months doesn't seem like a long time, but when you are rebuilding a life, 6 months is an eternity. I pulled into the driveway this morning. The first thing I noticed was the grass. It wasn't overgrown anymore. It was thick green and perfectly trimmed. There were no weeds cracking through the pavers. The house still looked like a mansion. Those white columns were still impressive, but it didn't look cold anymore. There were flower pots on the porch. Real flowers, not plastic ones. Marigolds and petunias, bright and happy. I walked up the steps and didn't even have to ring the bell. The door opened before I could reach for it. Hey, Mom, Ricky said, grinning. He looked like a different man. The dark circles under his eyes were gone. He had put on a little weight, healthy weight. His shoulders were back. He wasn't slouching. He wasn't hiding. Come on in, he said, holding the door wide. Coffee is already brewing. I walked into the foyer. The crystal chandelier was still there, but the house smelled different. It didn't smell like cheap perfume and secrets anymore. It smelled like fresh coffee and sawdust. It smelled like a home. We walked into the kitchen, the same kitchen where I had eaten a ham sandwich on a paper plate. The marble island was clear of clutter. No unpaid bills. No expensive wine bottles. Just a plate of muffins Ricky had picked up from the bakery. So I asked, taking a seat, did the paperwork go through? Signed and sealed, Ricky said, pouring me a cup. The refinance is official. The house is in my name. My name only. He set the mug down in front of me, and I sent the first check to Vance Capital this morning. He laughed, though I suspect the CEO of Vance Capital might just put it into a savings account for me. She might, I winked, or she might go on a cruise. She's earned it. We both laughed. It felt good to laugh. Megan and Joyce didn't put up much of a fight in the end. Grifters never do. When they realize the game is up, they don't stand and fight. They run to find an easier mark. That morning, 6 months ago, they were gone by 8:45 a.m. They took the SUV, which Ricky is still paying off, unfortunately, but it's a small price for peace. They took their clothes. They took the silver. But they left the house. Megan tried to send a few nasty texts threatening lawyers, but as soon as I mentioned the forensic audit I was planning to do on the bank accounts, she went silent. I haven't heard from her since. I hope she's happy. I hope she found someone else to fool. But honestly, I don't think about her much. I want to show you something, Ricky said. Come out back. He led me through the hallway, past the master bedroom, which was now clean with no silk robes in sight, and opened the door to the garage. I hesitated for a split second. The last time I walked through this door, my heart broke. But when Ricky flicked the light switch, the shadows didn't look scary anymore. The cot was gone. The space heater was gone. In their place was a massive workbench. Ricky had his tools organized on the wall, wrenches, hammers, saws. There was a half-finished wooden chair sitting in the center of the room. He was building furniture again. It was a hobby he loved in high school, but gave up because Megan said it was dusty. I'm making a set of dining chairs, Ricky said, running his hand over the smooth wood. Figured if I'm going to live in a big house, I should probably have furniture I actually like. I looked at the corner where he used to sleep. It was just a corner now, just concrete and tools. The ghost of the broken man who slept there was gone. It looks good, son, I said softly. It looks real good. Ricky leaned against the workbench and looked at me. His expression turned serious. Mom, he said, I never really thanked you. Not properly. You risked everything. You used your retirement money to buy this place. You could have lost it all. I didn't risk anything, I told him. You did, he insisted. Why didn't you just give me the cash? Why did you go through all that trouble with the fake company and the eviction notice? I walked over to him and brushed a speck of sawdust off his shoulder. Ricky, I said, if I had just given you the money, I would have been saving you. And a man doesn't need to be saved by his mother. He needs to remember he can save himself. I looked him in the eye. I didn't give you a handout. I gave you a sword. You were the one who had to swing it. You were the one who threw the clothes on the lawn. You were the one who took back your bedroom. I just bought the battlefield, so you could fight. He smiled, his eyes shining a little. He hugged me then. A big, bare hug that lifted me off my feet. Thanks, Mom, he whispered. I drove home that afternoon feeling lighter than I had in years. I thought about all the women out there listening to this. I know I'm not the only one. I know there are mothers right now watching their children struggle in bad marriages, watching them lose their spark, watching them fade away. We want to step in. We want to fix it. We want to scream. But sometimes screaming isn't the answer. Sometimes you have to be quiet. You have to be smart. You have to wait in the shadows until the moment is right. I never wanted to use my savings for revenge. I wanted to use it for a beach house. But looking at my son's face today, looking at the man he has become again, I know I made the right choice. Sometimes you have to buy the battlefield to win the war. Would you have done the same? Would you have gone to that extreme to save your child? Or do you think I went too far? Tell me in the comments. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next